All right, so we just have a bit of a chat here while waiting for other people to, or actually the top of the hour, which is at 10. So, but I know it's a bit different. We're in a studio, but Wendy, aren't you used to being in a studio for your news business?
Yeah, I have a home studio. It's not as big and nice as this. And before the pandemic started, we have a big studio that we go into with a green screen and everything, hot lights. So yeah,
So how's
fun.
So and that's all that's in your house then?
Yeah, I converted like my sort of storage garage area to a green screen room for, with the pandemic, for example, the video editor who would normally have been in the studio filming with me, family got COVID. So there was a period of time, prior to vaccines and things like that, where we, obviously we had to just quick. So it's another great example of how this pandemic allowed companies to actually be very flexible and very innovative. And so actually being able to find equipment that could be very portable and set up in someone's home. For example, our whole mission with local news is that small communities that don't have their own news could produce their own news.
Yeah.
And so in our town in Durango, the closest news is either Denver, which is 8 hours, 6 to 7 hours away, and Albuquerque, which is 3.5, 4 hours. So neither of those communities are relevant to our news. And I mean, so to know there's so many of these communities across America, these news deserts, as we call them.
News deserts.
Yeah, news deserts, where they've lost local papers. I mean, our paper in Durango only publishes Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So you've lost your newspapers, you don't have television news, all those things. So the ability to very cheaply and effectively have like a home studio where I do everything. I run my own teleprompter. I, obviously do my own makeup and everything, but I do the camera. You can use an iPhone or just a pretty, good cameras are easy to get. And so it does take a team, and it's a lot of effort to create a 3-minute story. But the fact that I can do that, a big piece of it, just right in my home. And that means that people across America or in other countries where there are news deserts could actually produce news. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that
makes sense.
Yeah.
So my takeaways from your story are one, I like how your eyes light up when you're talking about work that you clearly love doing. And I think that's what talent management is all about, right?
Yeah.
No matter what kind of technology you equip your people with, if they're not passionate about, if their eyes don't light up when they're talking about work, it's not going to work. Yeah. Second is the enablement part of it. So not saying, here's what I've thought of you in terms of technology, why don't you do this? More of understanding what people require, giving it to them. And you also mentioned being excited about it. So yeah, I think that's really key to making the entire home office work and getting people to deliver what they really want to deliver. So it's not about enforcement, it's not about command and control, it's about enabling and empowering.
I mean, one of the cool things is that I actually learned some new skills as a result, because before I would just, go into the studio and film, but now it's like, I know how to do the camera, I know how to do the sound, I know how to do the teleprompter. And so being able to feel very self-sufficient it's exciting, and knowing that I could pack that stuff up, set it up anywhere, and be able to do it anywhere. It's exciting to have those new skills that came out of this.
Yeah. Well, we're about to get started here, so I'm going to go ahead and start the multicast. I'll be right back. Get everything going here. And we'll get going. And then we have André Blom is going to be joining us as well. Okay, so let's see. You've already got the share going and anything like that. We start the multicast.
And Sam, your phone just went, or whoever's phone just maybe touch it. Okay.
All right, perfect.
Just if we need the clock. We're not getting it right now.
That's all right.
Okay.
We'll just have to look at the old-fashioned watch to keep our time.
Okay, perfect.
So, hello all, everyone. Welcome to the People Strategy Forum. As you can see, we are in a studio today, and we're really excited about that. We have the team together. But let me tell you about the People Strategy Forum a little bit first. So we are a group of experts that come together on a weekly basis that talk about modern talent management and people strategy techniques to overall better the industry. And so our intent is that we want to help all those developing small and developing businesses out there, whether that you're just emerging or you are an established business. There's strategies that we have that can help your business and help your people be happier. So I want to introduce our regular host that we have today. Online, we have Shar Miller. She is a regular people expert that is with us. Shar is a people strategist, and she's also an entrepreneur of many sorts, a lot of different businesses that she has. And so she gives us that small business expertise. And also she comes from some large healthcare background of being a people expert and a chief HR officer. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Hello.
All right. And then we have also online, we have Howard Neiswitz, who is with Comp Team. Howard is a long-established comp expert and also a systems expert. So he's passionate about helping those companies develop systems that are going to become so they can be more streamlined, be more modernized. And so I'm happy to have Howard here. Thanks, Howard.
Let me join.
Also here with me today, we have Sumit Singla from India. He's traveled a long way to be with us today here in Denver, Colorado. Sumit is a long-established professions and as a people expert in many large consulting companies. And so happy to have his expertise. But today we have both André Blom, he's a bit under the weather. He's joining us remotely. And also Wendy Graham of TMA USA. We're going to talk about the modern talent management. And so André Blom is the head of the international TMA, and we're very fortunate to have him here. So hello, André, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good.
And,
yeah. So Andre's not feeling well, so we're going to be join where you can. But Wendy, so tell us a little bit about how you got involved with TMA and a little bit about modern talent management.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for having me today. And it's really exciting to be all together. I'm thinking that it's kind of a cool real life situation of all the workforce situations with our clients that we usually working with, but it's actually our team having that experience right now, which is really cool, where we actually never were together. So we don't have that kind of situation where we're returning to work, but we've been virtual the whole time. And now it's very exciting that we're actually all in person together. So it's a really neat opportunity to actually be feeling what lots of other employees are feeling like as companies, kind of either move to hybrid or back to work or come together for the first time after many years.
That's right. It's been a long journey, right? So
Yeah.
we haven't been able to be together. Yeah, but it's nice to see each other face to face.
Yeah. And kind of experience what, the value of the human connection that we've kind of been missing for the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Still getting used to the idea of not seeing people from behind a computer screen.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's very, really seems momentous today.
Absolutely.
So my background is that, for many years worked at organizations where they used talent management tools, and there's so many out there, some very popular ones like Myers-Briggs or Hogan or, Predictive Index, DISC, Strengths Finders, Emergenetics. I mean, the list goes on. There's lots and lots of tools out there. And I'm going to say, I think probably some people will nod their heads when I say, yeah, they're all kind of, there's a lot of similarities, but there's differences, and, there's pros and cons and strengths and, weaknesses of each system, right? And each tool and sort of where they come from or their theory and background. And when I started working with Comp Team, Sam, you said, well, there's this great tool, Tma Method, and I'd like you to learn about it. And I was like, okay, cool. And, my first natural reaction is it's going to be kind of like the other systems. And that was my kind of initial first impression. Like, it's pretty cool. It's slick, it's nice, but what makes it unique?
Yes.
And then as I started getting trained as a practitioner and started to see what this tool is really about, I am not lying when I say it blew my socks off. Because my previous experience with other tools, maybe they were very good with the individual piece, but then I would have a team come together and I would spend hours manipulating the data, putting all these teams together to try to see trends and percentages and be able to provide valuable data to the team and the leaders about, what's the trend with this team? What's the strength of this team? Where do we have some gaps? And I would spend hours. And I mean, the presentation was good, but I mean, it would be a really big uphill battle just to get that information together. And what blows me away about TMA is that you can, the information is juicy, it's really detailed, it's rich, it's robust, and you can slice and dice it a lot of different ways with the click of a button. I'm not, doing spreadsheets, and math, math was not my strength. So I didn't have to get out the calculator, to find the percentages. And so that ability to, at the click of a button, provide meaningful information either to an individual or a team or to an organization is so powerful. But the other piece that I think a lot of people gravitate to other systems is just ease of use for the end user.
Right.
And that's for me, what's so powerful about TMA is that it is rich and powerful, but it's very easy for other people to also get that information.
Well, another thing is, I mean, how many times have you gone out and used one of these tools as a practitioner or perhaps a leader, and it does a small subset. The nice thing about TMA is that it has a whole integrated talent management platform. It's not just helping with your recruiting efforts, but it also helps with onboarding and development and so forth. So I think that there's a lot there to offer.
The fact that the approach is, and what we're talking about today, modern talent management, the fact that the approach for TMA is this integrated talent management, we're looking at the entire employee life cycle from that courting acquisition phase where we're dating each other, all the way to even the out of the box, very modern approach to succession, retention, and offboarding.
Right.
Even the saying goodbye is such a different concept than any other organization.
Is that what modern talent management is? Because we were talking about, what is it? So is it the fact that in the past we were looking at just certain elements? I think maybe it was specifically around setting up the organization with jobs and so forth, but and maybe getting into some of the development issues or development, moving people through the organization. But now we're looking at just a broader gamut. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to maybe just do right now is just do a quick hot lap with all the expert contributors today, just to say in one sentence, 2 sentences, what does modern talent management mean to you? Because I think it means something different to different people. What does it mean to you, Sumit?
I think it just means an approach which is human-centric. So tools and technology is secondary. It has to be woven around the lives of people than it being the other way around. Talking specifically of TMA and other tools and techniques, what I find is you've got a recruitment problem, you bring in a piece of technology, you fit it there, it doesn't talk to any other system. In my experience of TMA, what I find is it looks at the entire employee life cycle and tries to address the human need of each element. And these days we're facing tremendous pressure everywhere in terms of talent shortages, in terms of people wanting more meaning from their lives. So we need a method which helps in unlocking this entire value chain and in improving the human experience. And I think that's what TMA does really well.
And what about you, Shar? I know that you've used the modern talent management, the technique in your businesses and so forth, but how would you define modern talent management?
Well, I think as an HR practitioner for many years in my career, I think I often saw many leaders with a massive span of control that was doing a very regulated process relative to performance management, corrective action. And often leaders would complain that they only had, in one month, they had to get, 40, 50 performance evaluations done. And it was just a one-time event. I think the modern process, and this is what I've applied with my company is a kind of a beta test company for this Tma method. But, I love what André talks about really identifying what makes people click and really having those deep, meaningful, authentic, pure conversations about things that really interest an employee, about what their passions are, what their drives, what their talents, competencies are, and really listening as a leader to what your employee feels makes them tick and how they can contribute to the team and be a value add. I think every employee desires to be valuable and seen and understood and cared for. And that goes in line with my philosophy. I call it the HR with a heart mindset. I call it with the compassion, dignity, and respect component. And my organization has utilized this process for every aspect in the employee cycle, including the time we had to do layoffs. So I think that when, due to the fact that I have this integrated in my culture, the exit process temporarily, we're starting back up again here in a month, but it made it far more with compassion, dignity, and respect. And my employees don't have a negative taste in their mouth about my organization. And many want to come back once we get going again. So particularly for small business, I think this is fabulous. And it's definitely different than where I was in a more traditional HR mindset only a decade ago. It's definitely changed.
That's a good point. And so Howard, another piece, when we're thinking about systems and so forth, I mean, when we're looking at human resources systems in the past, I mean, there was somewhat disjointed. They didn't work together. When we're thinking about talent management practices, a lot of it was pen and paper. So there's a lot of new opportunities to systematize this. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And, it's phenomenal actually what we're able to do now with technology in terms of being able to do, these types of assessments and dive deep into understanding what drives employees and, what are their needs and desires and motivations. It would have been impossible to do this, years ago. You're right. There were a lot of pen and paper exercises and then, figure out how to make sense of it all. The technology allows us to, utilize our artificial intelligence to do outstanding things. I mean, amazing capability.
Yeah. So Wendy, tell us, what is the heart of modern talent management? Where does it all center from?
Well, I wanted to just offer what I've been thinking about in terms like, what does modern talent management mean to me? And just a concept that I don't think is new, but I just want to, I'd love to throw out there. And then also I'm curious if anyone who's listening wants to jump in on, and certainly want to hear from André as well, if he's willing, is what if, okay, so I don't know how to fix my car. And when my car breaks down, I take it to a car repairer that's their specialty. I don't love it, right? It's not my passion. Thinking about all the other coaches that I hire a nutritionist to help me make sure that I'm, being fed properly with the right nutrition. And, I go to people who have specialties. I have a fitness coach. I have, think about all of these coaches that we hire, a life coach, maybe a career coach, all of these people that help us stay on track and get to our goals. And what if we just really got it in our head that a people leader is a coach and a mentor, above anything else? And what I was thinking about is it's not that they don't already maybe even think of themselves in that role, but I think it's just still a bit more parental, it's the boss, it's, el jefe, it's just got this like stigma.
Yeah.
And what if it was just when I go to my nutritionist, I have an honest conversation. Like, I fell off the wagon. I was up in Denver, I ate the cookie or whatever it is. Right. And I have that because that coach is there to help me get to my goals.
Yeah.
And to keep me on track and to keep me motivated. And so I get to have it. The only person I'm lying to is me, right? If I'm not having that honest conversation. But I feel like there's just this dynamic between leaders and their people where it's not just a quick check-in where we have an honest conversation and you go, okay, well, what can I do to help you get back on track? Let's get you towards your goal. And it's a frequent and it's a quick and easy check-in. Mm-hmm. And why aren't we having that? And so for me, that's just like a really big piece when we're thinking about people leaders. That's certainly only one aspect of the employee life cycle and of modern talent management. But for me, one of the reasons I left corporate America is because of the annual review. It literally just put me off so badly that the only thing that happened to me is when I came in, I had a, let's set your goals conversation. And then a whole year later, we have a check-in, or even if it was every quarter, it was painful. But if I just had this different, like turn that relationship to like really trusting coach, mm-hmm. where we just have this quick check-in, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's a really open, honest conversation. And I feel like my leader is in my corner, cheering me on. That's a totally different relationship than that kind of punitive parental type of thing that I just feel is still pervasive. And if for those of you that are listening, if you have any thoughts on that or, contradictions, like I would love to hear if any comments come in, and love to hear from you guys. And André, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
It's funny, we get it right in sports, right? You think about, any of our teams, baseball, football, soccer, coaches are all over their team and they're not having conversations twice a year. They're always talking and that's accepted and it's fine. And people love it and people develop, deep relationships with their coaches, not only in terms of sports, but in terms of, how they view life. And yet when it comes to our corporations and businesses, we're still kind of operating under the old school of like, oh, people need to be managed and, beaten with a stick to get the things done. It's a nutty.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting when we talk about sports people, because remember, these are highly paid professionals who are earning way more than
me.
Definitely, of course, more than all of us, but highly paid professionals who are earning much more than the average human being. And then there are times when we say the coach has lost the dressing room and the players are not motivated to play for that person. The salary hasn't changed. What has changed for the player? Why doesn't the player want to go out there and do what they're really good at? It's because they've lost that equation of trust with the coach. And coming back to your example of the car repair person, so I'm just curious, when the person's working on your car, do you typically stand over their shoulder and say, hey, you know what, that nut hasn't really been tightened properly. You need to add more oil there. Or do you leave them to it and say, you're the expert, you figure out what to do. In case there's anything needed from me, if you have questions, just call me.
That's right.
Why?
That's right.
Then why do we do that in organizations? When you hire an employee, why do you insist on, even during the pandemic, why are we trying to check in every 5 minutes and say, how much have you accomplished?
That's right. I mean, it's even hilarious because I'll say, like, that's what I'm paying you the big bucks for, right? Because I want to delegate, because I don't want to touch that. So I think that's a great example. The other thing we were just talking about is that, with going back to the sports example, Howard, I'm glad you were telepathically tuning into our talk, which is that, and I think André would agree with this too, that it's about feedback is essential. And I would use the words early and often, right? So we're checking in real time. I mean, for that feedback, an example is me in the classroom. I need to check in. How's the temperature? How's everybody? Do we need a bio break? Do we need food? Do we need to get up and stretch? Checking in with the room rather than waiting for the survey at the end of the class to say, well, it was too hot. I couldn't see the screen, blah, 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 because then there's nothing I can do about it. But if we check in early and often, we can course correct, and it's no big deal. And we're just checking in. And the way the coaches will check in with their team, before they leave the locker room, during the game, like you said, we have a play running, the play didn't go well, let's make a quick thing, versus waiting till 3 weeks after the project's done. And then we're doing a post-mortem. I mean, there's nothing we can do. It's too late.
And I mean, I think we can still learn after 3 weeks, but coming back to the sports example, you'd have a timeout right then and there, figure out what's not working. How do we need to realign our strategy to win?
Yeah.
And even when you're setting the goals with the team, you don't really say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. The primary goal is, this is how the other team plays. This is what we'll do. We'll focus on defense, we'll focus on scoring the first touchdown and stuff like that. And then you come to the individual roles. So it's not everybody pulling in different directions, or you just go and do stuff. And 6 months later, I'll come back to you and say, you know what, in that game, which you've completely lost from your memory, this is what you should have done.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I mean, why not give instant feedback?
Yeah. And there's this whole thing where, maybe I think we're doing more better with kind of individualized development plans. But another thing we were talking about is that, I mean, you're part of a team, and the team is like, there's many teams, right?
Yeah.
It's like maybe just the team of you and your leader. It's the team that you work on. It's the greater team that you work on. And then it's this organization. I mean, another thing we're always hearing, I feel like, is people just don't know where they fit in.
Well, let's
To
talk
the
a little,
whole.
yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. I mean, when we're talking about these modern systems and what they can bring to us, what is ways that the TMA system really brings that data-driven knowledge to managers?
Yeah, so obviously it does a great job with providing an individual profile. But then, like I said, when we look at the ability of the system to provide real data for a team, whatever team we decide, it becomes such a powerful tool. Let me give you some real life examples. I mean, when we think about the theory of teams, really common one that people are familiar with is, the team is forming, storming, norming, finally performing, and then we have the fifth stage, which is adjourning, And what I think we forget is that anytime we add a new person to a team, that team is back in the forming stage and it's going to go through this. And of course, it doesn't even go necessarily in that order, right? I mean, that's a good theory, but the reality is it's like what I call like a roller coaster that's got 3 corkscrews and an upside down and a backwards. And it's this roller coaster, when these teams come together. And especially with this virtual environment and with the hybrid and with just everything right now, I think team forming, performing is really an interesting thing that's happening, because it's happening totally differently than it used to.
Yes, and I just want to dig in. So Shar, in your broad experience, I know that you've worked with many teams and so forth, but do you see that kind of disruption when a new team member comes in, it kind of sets things back a bit?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion about this, with every single team member, as well as every single department, every single person and department is unique and special. So at every time one individual comes into a new team, the entire dynamics of that entire team is completely shifted. I found that my smaller departments had a bigger impact with just 1 or 2 people rotating in and out of the team. And the dynamics of those teams were sometimes, from an HR standpoint and an employee relations standpoint, way more challenging than the department that had 100 employees and 1 employee was going in and out. But every single person needs to feel unique and special. One other example I'd like to talk about is whenever we would do a department restructure, now I'm getting HRE. Every employee wants to see their name on the org chart and where they belong. And particularly the newer people, how frustrating is it to come into a team we're slapping up old org charts that are from 2 years ago, and my name is not even on it. I'm totally excluded. I'm not value added. I'm not appreciated as an individual. So from an onboarding standpoint, how do you really help everyone feel included, accepted, and particularly now with the great exit or the resignation kind of shifting tides, this is more important than ever that we pay attention to those minor details that seem trivial, right? Like not being on an org chart, typical stuff like that.
Yeah.
And one thing I also want to point out is that if we have a well-formed team that's very functional and everybody has a specific purpose or role in that team, it may not be just that like a CFO where they have a knowledge, skills, and abilities that are around that title, but they also have behavioral characteristics such as they're bringing people together perhaps and so forth. So when you lose a team member like that, it's a gap, and you really need that skill set to get back to normal. So how do we find that skill set?
Yeah, so I mean, that's what's so cool about using a tool like TMA, because number one, you have a database, a rich database with all the different types of information that you can collect. For example, we just have like the individual assessment, and we have, but there's also 360 assessment. There's also cognitive assessment. So you could data mine your internal organization and say, you know what we're missing now that person has left? We need someone who's really goal oriented, because this team is very, practical and process oriented, but we need someone to really focus on goals. And so this is a gap on this team that we want to bring in. We don't necessarily have to look outside the organization. Certainly you can use the tool to do that, but why not look internally first and just see what you have? And if you can see that, well, this person is from a different department, may not even have the skill set, but we can see with the cognitive test, they're going to take this team and do wonders with it.
Right.
That type of thing. I mean, so having the ability to either look at a job and compare it with a profile, or look at for example, the competency piece of TMA is also really amazing. And so the company has spent the time to identify, to be successful here, no matter what your role is, these are the essential competencies. Yeah. And if we look at that and they don't have it, maybe it's just good information.
Yeah, I just want to bring this up again because, Howard being the system expert, I mean, imagine, and Shar, I know that you're familiar with this too. Imagine what we've did in the old days is diving through the employee files, right? And nobody wants to spend time doing that, right? And so there's these modern systems in place now that can harness that information and make it practical.
And guess what? Those even those files didn't have the information that we needed, right? Yeah. I mean, even think about your resume or your, like what I really think about is my portfolio, and I might not share all elements of my portfolio with you that maybe would actually be helpful information, So, and then obviously these tests and, tools, assessments that we can use provide us a lot of information that I don't even necessarily know about myself, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wanted to add, one way I utilized the TMA was that I really talked with all of my team about, I would like every member of our team to be a recruiter, and every member of our team to identify the holes in our organization around competencies, skill sets, capabilities. And when we're looking for talent, all of us in that company, doesn't matter what our positions are, need to be aware of the competencies and the talent that we need to help our team be the most successful. So all of my employees were highly involved in the recruitment process. All of my employees knew that I'd like them to help us recruit and be out there speaking to the community and identify exactly the talent that we're looking for. And also I feel that helped with the onboarding and integration with the team, because everyone had ownership with, hey, we as a team recruited you because we want you to work with us and belong to our team and be part of our talent. and not that whole, I call it the hazing aspect. So how many of you have worked with an organization and you come in and all of a sudden the competition's there, the bureaucracy, someone's like, oh, someone's going to take over my job, or, I'm going to be overlooked with this new team member coming into play. And all the politics and behind the scenes aspects start to happen. So I utilize TMA very differently in that aspect as well, by opening that communication about who do you want to work with? Who do you want to spend most of your life with? Because this is going to be just as much your ownership as the company's ownership.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of techniques that companies can utilize. I mean, once we understand a person's work preferences and how they communicate and so forth. I mean, what are the parts of bringing that team together? I mean, there's in bringing awareness of one another's preferences.
Yeah, this is all about, this is all about awareness, right? It's a data point. And it's useful information for me personally, and also for my team members to know about me.
Yeah.
Because, the important thing to remember is that while I might have certain natural talents and I have, passions and interests, it doesn't mean that I can't do other things that maybe aren't my natural preference, right? But for my team members to know, like, that I prefer, or that I can really bring the best of me when certain conditions are right, such as communication or learning style, learning situations, then, both, if it's possible to make that happen, hey, great, because then I can really flourish and get my energy and feel and avoid burnout. But the other flip side is, hey, we all have to function. We all have to work with each other, right? So sometimes I'm going to flex outside of my natural preference or comfort zone, and the awareness from my colleagues that we know that Wendy is flexing right now, and she might be a little short, might be tired at the end of the day, might need to, have some quiet time or rest, recoup, whatever it is, so that I can, because they recognize that might be energy draining for me, so just that ability to be able to talk to each other and just say, hey, this is outside my comfort zone. This isn't really what I do best, but I'm going to do it because the job asks for me to do it.
And I love that term flexing, because, it's like, this is where I like to work and meet where my skills are, but I can do that over there. So I got to flex to do that need. And it does take effort, right? So it takes more effort, more energy.
So this is about knowledge and using that information to take care of myself, take care of my colleagues. And where does this, for me, it definitely is part of our entire life, because even letting my family know, I've been in the classroom for 12 hours today or something. I'm going to be exhausted when I get home. So knowing yourself and having that data point to be able to even make your personal relationships better, for me, that is powerful.
Right.
Agreed. And the other thing I was thinking of with your example was, if the learning styles, if when a person is flexing or when they're in their own comfort zone, it's got its own business implications as well. For example, if whether a large chunk of your people understand with practical examples versus versus some of them prefer theory, you can align your learning programs to them. It translates into direct impact on the company financials. So it's not just stuff that HR folks would say, or that's warm and fuzzy to hear and good to know. It's got actual real-time dollar value, and that's what talent management can do. It can unlock tremendous monetary value for the organization. So of course, if you're attracting better people, if you're enabling them to succeed, if you're making the right business decisions, that's all it takes to make people successful, right?
Yeah.
And for you to be successful as an organization as well.
Once again, it comes down to having the data, because if you, that's what these systems bring. They bring you that intel, and without it, you have nothing to work with, right?
Yeah. So going back to using, for example, TMA for team assessment, it's what I'm loving about using it is that, once I have the team that, for example, either already exists, or maybe it's a hypothetical team that I want to put together and see how would this team possibly function, right? At their best, in an ideal situation. We can find out what are the team trends. So for example, I know what my talents are individually, but as a team, what are the talents of this team? Because again, the positive psychology of TMA, we are embracing our talents and saying, yeah, this is my talent and this is how I like to show up and this is where I bring my best, versus, oh, this team doesn't have, blah, 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 right? And so we're really saying, this is what this team can do really well. And so that's what I love, is being able to use the individual assessments to look at the team as a whole. And we would say anyone with a 50% or more talent as a team, then this team has that talent.
That's great. It's taking you back to the Olympics. And we were talking about that dream team, right? If you all remember that basketball team. But the thought is, if you can kind of play around with this, if you're thinking or planning for a product launch of something in the future, you need to have a special team for that. You can plan ahead to bring those people together and see, and then work with them on their interest on that particular initiative, right?
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that example of the Olympic team is perfect, because of course they're picking just the right players to have this dream team. And so I think that's a great example. That's really fun to think about. And yeah, so that's another powerful use of the tool, is to kind of say, this new team that we're putting together, they need to be able to have these competencies or have these talents. Let's put a hypothetical team together and see how they might interact. And just going in knowing this team might not have certain strengths, but they have these other strengths. Let's play to those strengths. Let's use them for that. And let's find other people who are really good at this other stuff to do that other stuff.
Agreed. I mean, I think maybe we should reach out to certain unsuccessful teams and show them how TMA can make a difference, because what you see is a lot of sports teams do have the tendency to collect all stars and expect them to deliver results without looking at what are the individual strengths and weaknesses. How can you get them to function together as one single cohesive unit that delivers results? So simply collecting whoever's the best in a particular role will not bring you results. And we see that in the sports arena. But again, as organizations, somehow we're blind to this reality, and I don't think we recognize it enough.
Right. Well, we're talking a lot about teams, but I know we're in modern talent management, TMA can do a lot of things. What about in development? How can TMA be used to help develop people?
Well, I think, again, if we go back to that idea of the people leader as a coach, as a mentor, and, coming from learning and development, I just feel like that responsibility is just often dumped on learning and development, or the succession planning team or whatever. And, really the best person is that coach, to have that frequent, quick check-ins. So what's cool about this tool is if you are having those early and often conversations, then nothing is a surprise. You and your team member are in what their goals are, both personal and professional, and you're in their court cheering them on and you want to help them get there. Then it's very easy to have that development plan. It's very easy to put a coaching, mentoring conversation in place. One thing I love about TMA is that a lot of people leaders got into their role because they were good at the job, not necessarily because they were a good coach.
Right.
Okay. It's a different skill set.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're not going to change that. And so how do we give people leaders a tool that is very turnkey so that they can say the right thing and say it in the right way? And that's one of the things that I love about the TMA portal is that they have put together, they've tied conversations, mentoring, development conversations to competencies and to your particular talents, passions and interests.
Well, I want to recognize Shar, because Shar is, you've used this in your business, right? As far as using the TMA apps and the system, and to identify those competencies and for the coaching process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you, Andre. He's on here. He's been such a blessing to our team. Actually personally helped us with setting the stage. Acting as a model. So proud of my employees, and not only my younger generation employees, but also some of us more mature that really embrace this philosophy. Again, it had to be a part of that entire talent management approach. Again, I want to say, just like I said, that all of us are recruiters, all of us are coaches as well. Particularly in my organization, we have small teams. So typically each location has about 3 to 4 employees. So it's not we don't have the luxury of having a trainer, a hired trainer or hired coach that would go out to every single facility and do the coaching. So each employee was trained to be a coach. Each employee is trained to coach to their strengths. So we would identify those strengths and say, hey, for example, George, you're excellent with attention to detail. Can you work with Melissa? And since you're so excellent with attention to detail, Melissa, you're excellent at communication and really getting to the heart of what our clients need. Can you help Coach Sally? I mean, so we did a lot of that cross training process. And then we also would take the environment, just because somebody had a home base in one town, you know, like Centennial, we would take that employee and have them go to Aurora and work with maybe more of a bilingual or someone that had different types of talents in that area. And so our employees loved it. In fact, they felt so appreciated that we said, even though you've only worked with us for 6 months, you've got skills, talents, strengths that we want you to share with the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. So that's how our development strategy worked. And believe me, I've seen all kinds of leadership development processes because I was in charge of those departments. But in the last 2 years, I've completely shook up the cart, and now it looks completely different than it used to, like a few years, you know, before all of this happened in the last couple of years.
Good points. I mean, and I like the part you were saying about people having these unique skill sets. Specifically, we call them superpowers, you know, and if those things that if we just talk to one another a little bit, we can learn a little bit about each other's superpowers, right?
Yeah.
And be able to.
I have to say this, not to interrupt you again, because I always do that, but my team actually created for the entire HR department, which had about 50 employees, we created a little superpower image, and it was a little superpower meme guy for each person with their superpower. So mine was collaboration, and I had this funny little lady in blue with her big wings and blonde hair flowing around, and it said collaboration. Whereas my colleague, you know, his was all about diversity and inclusion. So, you know, he had his multicolor character. But my employees absolutely love that, and the entire team, because they're like, yes, this is my superpower, and this is what I'm going to bring to this team. And it really was a positive mojo for everybody. And it was a lot of fun.
I mean, that is the completely different conversation than saying, you know, I'm really good at this, but I'm just not that good at that.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much more exciting to actually embrace something that maybe we've felt judged about before, you know, mm-hmm. But being able to know what you're good at and like why you can embrace that and feel good about that and say, I bring this to the table, and not just that I bring it, but it's needed, mm-hmm. Because that's that other piece. We have talents, we have passion and interest, but we need to put those to good use. So when it gets when we realize that what we bring is actually useful to other people or to the organization, that's when it starts to feel meaningful.
Right.
Yeah.
Good points. The other thing, as far as the just these development conversations, is what's really hot right now is asking your employees where they want to go with their career, right? Yeah. And creating those steps and the training along that, so that they can get to their dream job someday when they want to be there. And so, how can TMA help with that?
Well, I think that's going back to the fact that we're having early and often and frequent conversations. And these are not long things. These are check-ins.
Yeah.
As a coach, as a mentor, as someone who I believe in you and I want you to get where you want to go, whether that's with my team, my organization, or something else.
Absolutely.
This is where the humanity of what we do comes in.
Right.
Because we're probably not going to be together forever. You know, that concept of being a lifer just doesn't really exist for most people. So, but if as a person, I can feel like I contributed to your next step in the right direction, in the direction that you want to go, that's meaning for me. I feel like I did something good with my life.
Yeah.
Whether it's.
Yeah, I will tell you, I did utilize this extensively. So I knew that one of my employees wanted to be an epidemiologist. Another employee was a drummer, wanted to be a professional drummer. Another employee really had a passion for corrective action or corrective, like law enforcement. Okay, not corrective action, law enforcement. And so I knew every single employee where their long-term career goal was. And so we talked about career mobility constantly. And how could this organization align to your strategy? And I constantly said, I expect that you might not work with us in the next 3 years. And they would look at me, oh, I want to work with you forever. I said, I'm being very realistic. I would assume that you might want to move on, and that's okay. So let's align your competencies and your development to the actual career that you're aspiring to be. And if we can fit it into this company, like a compensation or a compensation manager, how about that? Or how about a compliance director? How can we align your skill set competencies to your dream job? And how can we help you create that?
Right.
So
it's the difference between lifting people up versus, pointing out everything that's wrong with them. That's why people fear the year-end review so much. Oh no, I'm going into this, you're going to tell me everything I did wrong, versus having someone in your corner saying, you know what, we're going to develop plans that's specific for you, and you're going to be able to do great things, whether it's here or somewhere else, and I'm going to be there to take you along the way.
Right. It shows that you care, right? I mean, it's
right.
And that opportunity may be inside the company or it could be outside the company. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I know Howard and I work together a lot in helping companies develop what we call career architecture, making sure that you know where the next step in the job is. And so when we use TMA in this aspect, we identify the types of competencies that are required to get to that next level job and the degree of expertise that you need in that particular competency. So painting this pathway, creating these visual career paths for your people, it can be very rewarding and lead to greater retention and engagement in the organization.
I'll just tell my personal story, which is that I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Obviously, and anybody that knows Wendy, she has
no, you want to be a certified scuba diver.
Yeah,
certified scuba.
Yeah, I don't, I never had a strong direction. And so I wanted to bring this up, and be transparent, because not everybody you meet has a life plan. I know other people, they're like, by 20, I'm going to have done this. By 25, I'm going to do this. By 30, I'm going to do this. And that just still isn't me. Okay. And so for me, thinking about being a young person, a tool like this, where having that information about myself and having either my leader or someone else, that could have that coaching conversation and say, you have these talents. And if you are passionate about this might be a cool direction to go. And so being able to help someone who doesn't, unlike some of Shar's employees who knew where they wanted to go. What about someone like me who just doesn't know? But having that information is really helpful, right?
It is.
Yeah. So being able to help people find a direction and have that architecture in place is so important for someone like me who maybe didn't have a clear idea, has lots of interests, has lots of hobbies, wants to, keep learning and try new things, but doesn't have a clear direction.
Right. And I know that we've talked about a lot of things today. We've talked about, that using TMA for team development. We've talked about using it for teaming in development, and we've talked about it also a little bit in the hiring element. But we can use TMA for succession planning and so forth, right? I think we mentioned a little bit about it, but if we dive into a little bit deeper, how can TMA be used for succession?
You want to talk a little bit about succession?
So it's one of the topics where you'll have to shut me up. I can talk about it for ages. So there are two aspects to it. One, like you said, helping your people find the right direction, enabling them to get there. And what I find in my consulting role is many companies are confused about whether you're trying to retain an employee or detain an employee. So the two are very different. The idea is not to lock them in and say that you're invaluable, hence I'll keep you in a tall tower, locked up forever, throw away the key. How can I help you in flourishing? How can I create a system which enables you to grow, and we grow replacements for you? So one of the earliest pieces of career advice I was given by one of my managers was, if you want to succeed as a professional, work towards making yourself completely redundant. Otherwise, you'll never grow. So do not work towards making yourself indispensable. Otherwise, you'll be stuck. And that advice has stayed with me forever. I think as leaders, as managers, we tend to fall into that trap of, this person is really crucial to my success. Great programmer. I do not want this person to become a team leader. So you refuse to participate in that succession activity. You don't care about what the person really wants. So they quit and they become a team leader somewhere else.
Yeah.
And now you've lost key talent in two different directions.
Yeah.
And other people, what's worse is, this is one person. There are 10 other people watching saying, you will never get to a career path of your choice here.
That's right.
Start looking out.
That's right.
And it completely destroys the fabric of the organization, and you lose out all the great work that you might have done on the recruitment and the other components of talent management.
That's right. How would you use some of the assessments that, for example, TMA and other tools offer, the individual assessment, 360s, cognitive, how would you use those in either the current, tools that you use for succession as complementary, or, tell me a little bit about how you could see that being used?
I think it's easy. I mean, a tool like TMA, it gives you the competencies. You do know what is the level of competency required at each level. And so you can design programs, and you can check with the person, with your employees, on which direction do you want your career to take. Fine, you wanted to branch in this direction. These are the competencies that would be required. Let's now work on an action plan. So you use the tool, you get the data. Like Sam said, there's rich amounts of data available, but you have to be willing to use it as a leader. So you bring it to life by saying, this is what the information I have from the system. This is how we're going to use it. And it has to be in conjunction. So it cannot be a prescription. It has to be consultative. You have to keep the person's ambitions aligned. And of course, you can guide them in the direction the organization is going in. So it's not like, I want to be a baker, therefore, in a consulting organization, I expect you to help me get to that career. I mean, people are smart. They do realize that's not realistic.
Yeah.
So nobody's going to come to you with that kind of ambition as well.
Well, one thing I like, go ahead, Shar.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have facilitated hundreds of succession management facilitations with organizations. I have witnessed the whole and facilitated the entire process of the 9 boxes I reference. And many of us HR practitioners know exactly what that means. And, what's interesting to me is, we identify the 1 or 2 people in the upper right-hand quadrant, which are our superstars. We identify the people that are well-placed. We identify the people that need to go. But what's fascinating about it, I often, as the HR person, would know the insides and out of that individual. And yes, that person may be well-placed, but has anybody really talked to them about do they feel well placed and do they want to stay in that organization long term, or do they have a desire to be developed and move to a different type of position or leave the organization altogether? And also the person that is not a good fit, why do we not have the compassion, dignity, and respect? That person's been with us for 15, 16 years, but nobody's really sat down and said, we don't feel you're well placed and we'd like to help you transition to either another department or outside the organization. How can we support you and help you? So I think my short answer, like what Sumit was saying, and Sumit and I've talked about this as well, these pragmatic processes that are very tactical need to be integrated with something that's more deep and meaningful and truly will help that employee aspire to be the very best they can be with us or any organization. And yes, if our HR leaders are trained to help do this, I think that we could definitely take it to a whole new level.
Right. Well, I know we. Oh, go ahead, Howard.
André.
No, it was me. It's a pleasure to listen to all your stories and the way you talk about our method. But maybe I can add something when it comes to succession planning, or how to make sure that people are happy on board. I think it is also about giving people a right experience through a cycle. And one of the things that I'm really strongly advocate is at the end of a cycle, it is not an evaluation, but I would call it a retention dialogue.
Right.
Because they have been developing themselves for a whole year. And this is also what the Tma Method stands for. It's also provoking self-determination. It is not only a tool for the organization, but also for the individual. When you talk about feedback, it is also helping peer development. They can do it together. You don't always have to be there as a coach or as a leader to make sure that people are developing themselves. You can also pair them up and they can work together. We also realized that a lot of good managers, because they became manager, as Wendy said before, because they were really good at their job, doesn't mean that they are good as managers. So what we also provided is a really, I think, a very fine content, so that they can at least, when they have the dialogue, and I think that is really important, and Wendy stipulated that also, it is not about collecting just the data, look at the data, and then, but it is about having a constant dialogue. I think you even referred to that when you said, like, bringing a little bit humanity back in the business. And when it comes to strategic planning and succession planning, how can you do that if you have no idea what people are really craving for? Right. If you don't have an idea how they want to develop, in what direction, and that can be done again in a dialogue. So when you look at an employee experience, it is about, do I belong here? Do I have some worth? Do I bring worth to my team, to my company? Do I get attention? Can I pay attention to others in supporting them? And then I think that's a very human thing. We want to take care, and we want to be taken care of. And if that's going on in the cycle, then you know that at least you have people on board, and you will not be surprised when they leave you, or when they want to go one step ahead. It is all about making sure that you are spot on, that you can respond instantly, that you have good solid data, with also the employee having insight in that data on their personal level, so that they can work with it. And then I think when you take the whole experience from 1 year, when you have all the tools available with feedback, and at the end of the year, you really have a retention dialogue. We talked about developing in this direction. How did you proceed? Hey, what does that mean for the role and the job you're in now? You have worked a whole year. Can we modify your role? Can we give you additional challenges, or should we retune a little bit what your contribution should be? Because you've learned something, so you can bring it up to a different level. And when people feel that this is the way we treat them, they will show loyalty, and they will advocate to be in the company So that is also helping for your recruiting processes. I think that the focus on having a solid employee experience is maybe the biggest challenge that we have in HR now. Because if you look at the world, we are coming from what I call scientific management. The way we organize our organizations are very mechanical. As an example, I always say, like, I sometimes say, like, oh, the service is not good enough. We did a survey on quality. So what are we going to do to improve our service level? We install a unit, quality and services, instead of talking to the people. So this whole scientific management doesn't work anymore. And if you look at the human resource movement from Covey to Maslow, even the Dave Ulrich program on the 4 grids, it doesn't work. The HR business partners, it's not functioning. So I think we should bring it back to management and make sure that they are connected with people.
Yeah.
And there is where performance takes place, and there is where development takes place. It doesn't take place in the head of an HR strategist.
Hmm.
It doesn't work there. You have to bring talent management to the level where it belongs. And then if you have that kind of data, then you can steer, use that data for an organization to give you the new direction. So I think that is the way forward. If we really focus on the individual, and like Wendy said, help the individual, we call it personal leadership, to look at himself, the mental capacity, who am I, how do I tick, and where do I respond in the best way on? How does the individual look to the others, to a team, and vice versa? And I think that's the way contemporary talent management should be.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, André, for giving us that detail. So I know that there are many of our listeners are interested in learning more about TMA and the company overall. Can you give us a little bit of a summary of how long TMA has been around, how it's used across the globe, and where they can learn more information?
TMAs have been around since 2005, where we developed our first assessment. And from the moment we started to develop the assessment, we were realizing this is not our way. We use assessments, but we should have a more holistic approach on talent management. So it is about, positive psychology. It is about how can we align people with an organization. And we always wanted to have a kind of a growth mindset, like, we should look at the positive things of people. It's a far better way of going forward than just saying, like, you're not good in this or that or that. So since 2005 we started. It is grounded in Holland, the Netherlands, and in 2009 we went international, just in Europe to begin with, and now we are here in the USA. We are alive in Mexico, in southern parts of Africa continent, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and of course in Europe we have quite a foothold. And if you see where companies are using it for, in the beginning it was a lot about recruiting, and you could see we are seeing that it's shifting to much more to the onboarding, much more to the personal development. So we see a very nice growth in how people are using our methodology. What we are also have been able to do is to connect it with other HR systems, because that is what TMA is not doing. We're not having the administration part of HR. We're not working with contracts or with sick rates or holidays or those kind of things. We don't do. So we are connecting with success factors, with Workday, so they can have the what I would call the quality data, the good talent management tools. So that's a little bit our history, and yeah, we're doing fine. And actually the pandemic has been in our favor. Because what you could see is like, management was losing their normal observation techniques and possibilities because people were now all of a sudden at home. They didn't have the dialogue at the coffee machine anymore. They couldn't see what was going on. And they had a need for, understanding and getting forward. So what we realized is that during the pandemic, a lot of requests came from, can you please help us? We really want to stay in connection with our people. So we're growing rapidly.
Great. Well, thank you, André. So if any of our listeners out there would like to learn more about the TMA method, we'd be happy to take you through that. Wendy, our esteemed colleague here, knows all about the methodology and can train people on the methodology as well. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to compteam.net and we'll get you set up and with the support that you need. But I want to thank everyone on our forum today. Thank you, Wendy and Sumit, for coming all the way out from India and joining us here. And we'd hope to see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. Perfect. It's a wrap. All right.